Greg, I think when you mentioned earlier, you said the gray lady. I haven't heard that phrase in quite some time. It's something that people used to use a lot in the past to refer to the New York Times as the gray lady. And I would venture to say, you promised me you were going to put up the colorful lady. The colorful lady. I'm speaking totally without props or anything, but I did want Greg to put up the New York Times, nytimes.com, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Let me get out of the limelight. Thanks. But I would say to what Greg mentioned, the gray lady, that, yeah, in some ways we still are the gray lady. We're still the newspaper that everybody looks to for, the best, the most comprehensive information out there. If you really want to know what's going on in the news in the world, you're going to read the New York Times. You're going to have to read the New York Times. In fact, I don't know how many of you have been here most of the day, but if there has been one source cited more than any other, probably by far, in the various speeches by people here, it's the New York Times. And that's the gray lady. That's because we are authoritative, we are thorough, we've got people who are experts in their field and really know how to report a story. But in some ways we're not the gray lady, and this is the New York Times too. It's not that print thing that you get, and when I was here many years ago it was quite hard to get. Probably still is not that easy to get here. But this thing is easy for anybody to get anywhere around the world, anytime, and in a variety of ways. And I'll just kind of give you a couple of statistics of what the new New York Times is and the reach of the New York Times. It is the #1 ranked newspaper on the web with 33 million unique users in August, 662 million page views. The average minute per visit is nearly 40 minutes. That's by far higher than any other news website. For all news and information sites, we rank 5th. But that includes places like Yahoo. And of course they're free. And I'll talk about our pay model in the end of it. And so, how did we get from the gray lady to this? And I'll tell you a bit through my lens, which is as a business editor of the Times since the beginning of 2004. And it has been a really great transformation, and I think a lesson, if you really put your mind to it, how you can transform a culture of a company. So if you dial back to them when I joined the New York Times, NewYorkTimes.com was actually housed in a different building from the New York Times. It was about 5 or 6 blocks away. Now, part of that, there wasn't that much space. But I think also there was a little bit of a mindset that, these people work for the print edition, and these people work for the poor cousin, the web edition. There was quickly an understanding that really that was not a way to go. But back to that, in that period, to try to bridge the gap, we had something that was called a continuous news desk, C&D desk. And the idea of that desk was to, kind of help get stories up a little bit faster than we had in the past. But again, that C&D desk operated separately from the major news desk in the newspaper. And so it was very disjointed. They would put up business news stories. They would have somebody maybe write a quick version of a business news story, while the real reporter working for me would write that story sometime during the day that would appear, kind of in the next day's paper. I'm not making this up. The fact that we actually had 2 different people writing the same story doesn't seem to make any sense at all now, but that's the way we did it. There was quickly a recognition that this couldn't continue forever. And about 6 or 7 years ago, the business desk became, kind of like the guinea pig for the newsroom. And part of it was because I knew that, business news is very fungible. The most important stories, people want to know what's happening now. They don't want to wait until the next morning. And so we decided to integrate business news with the web, starting with my department. And we understood that we couldn't be a wire service. I mean, we're just not going to be able to compete with the speed with which, say, Bloomberg or Dow Jones Newswires or Reuters puts up a story. But rather we would say, okay, what are the 5 or 6 whatever the number is, most important news stories that happen during the day, and let's make sure that we're competitive on those. Let's make sure that we put up a story as quickly as possible. And then, and it might be kind of a bare bones story, but it's a story informed by the intelligence of our reporters. The CND desk reporter, we took one of those reporters, embedded them within the business desk. So that reporter now reported to me. But that reporter also worked in tandem with other reporters in my department. So if there was a big story, kind of announced bank earnings, for example, the CND reporter might help out with that, but quickly the reporter who covers the banking industry would jump on that story and do that story for the web. So it was, a smart story. It wasn't just, kind of regurgitated a bunch of fact stories. If the story was important enough, it often would be redone, but again, by the beat reporter, the reporter who's an expert. And so that in the next day's paper, we wouldn't have just what happened yesterday. We would have what I call a day and a half story on the first day, or a second day story on the first day. It would be analytical, kind of smarter. Ideally, give it some more insight. Because I don't know about you, when I pick up a newspaper and I see headlines that I saw yesterday on the web, I go on to the next thing. I'm like way, way too busy to have to read something that I already know about. So our jobs became harder, but it became really imperative for us to do that. I recall as we were embarking on this transition, holding a staff meeting, and kind of my old department got together and I explained kind of what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and why I felt it was necessary for us to do this. And kind of a hand shot up in the back of the room. The other thing that we also decided at the time was that in addition to the major news, we were going to take some of our enterprise, non-breaking news stories, just kind of in-depth stories that we run, kind of, every day of the week. And we would sometimes post those, the day before, that they would run in the newspaper. In the past, we would always post everything around 10 o'clock at night. You'd kind of get this, kind of fire hose download of the New York Times at 10 o'clock at night. But, otherwise, other than the kind of the breaking news during the day, you really didn't have anything. Instead, we wanted to keep people coming back to the website, make sure that the site felt fresh, that it was changing, it was updating constantly. So we were going to take our enterprise and take a few things and put them out. And maybe we'd put our columnist out, Now, if it was something that was very exclusive and that we thought somebody might match, we might hold that, kind of till late in the evening, and so it would feel fresh, and also that our competitors couldn't get it. But in fact, we were trying to front-run our own newspaper on the web. So a hand shot up in the back of the room and said, Larry, gee, kind of, does this really make sense? Don't we run the risk of cannibalizing ourselves? Why are people going to buy the newspaper if they can get, the content online earlier? As a matter of fact, if you think of it, so you could pay $700 a year, to get the paper, kind of on Tuesday, whereas on Monday you could get most of that stuff free. Why would you do that? Well, I actually think that there's a good reason to do that because it binds reporters, our readers to our paper writ large. My response to the reporter was kind of worrying about cannibalizing. I said, look, you guys are all business reporters. Let's dial back the clock to, 1960s, 1970s. The Japanese start making these small cars. Detroit says, oh my God, small cars, you can't make money on those things. We're going to let them have the small car market. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to concentrate on the big car market, what we think we do best. Well, we all know how that one ended up. And I said, we can choose to cannibalize ourselves. We can choose to kind of post things earlier, faster, trying to get more enterprise, trying to get people coming to our website throughout the day as opposed to just kind of make it, kind of, they're going to look at it once during the day. But if we do that, then somebody else is going to cannibalize us. So, kind of, we have a choice. We can cannibalize ourselves, or we can let somebody else cannibalize it. And I think that there's really, no choice when you look at it that way. And, I think everybody got that. There, kind of weren't many complaints. I didn't quite get a standing ovation. I must say. But everybody kind of understood that the world was changing around us. Now, this was a little bit before things really started turning down. So this was probably '05 when we embarked on this. And it was a little bit difficult. You know, you had reporters used to kind of coming in, 10 o'clock, story breaks, they think about it, they put out some calls to their sources, they go to lunch, they come back from lunch, they call a few more people, they start writing maybe around 4 or so. Anybody who's been a newspaper editor kind of knows what I'm talking about. And then the copy starts flowing in, usually all at the same time, like around 5 o'clock, and then there's this mad scramble to get everything together. So we were asking them to do something a bit differently. It's like, look, if it's a major story, we want you to write it up quickly. We got to get it up on the web, and it has to be a credible thing. And then we also want you to kind of get it out of the way and move on to the next thing. Or we want you to make it a lot more analytical. That requires, a lot more reporting, a lot more thinking about it, and it really has to be kind of a level higher than the story that you used to write for the newspaper. So your jobs are going to be harder, and we're not going to really pay you any more than that. But, we think this is the way to go. And I think it was the right decision. And again, if you fast forward today and you look at the data, kind of on our readership online, I think it shows by far that this strategy has worked. Everybody understands that feeding the web is part of their job. The web producers, who also used to be in a different building, and then initially kind of came back and were in the same building but were not really integrated into the departments, are now in each department. So the people who are managing my web pages, if you click to the, Greg, if you click to the business page here, these people report to me. We have producers that help with all the multimedia stuff that we do too. They're dedicated to, kind of business day. And in fact, they're kind of generally within specific clusters of reporters. So we have somebody who is dedicated to the, kind of tech report that we put together. And we have somebody dedicated to finance. So that they also are becoming experts in what they do. Another thing that I think has particularly helped Business Day, kind of grow our audience, and the audience of Business Day has, more than doubled in the past few years, because I think that, kind of one, we have this broader integration. We're trying to post stories earlier, but also we're recognizing something that the web enables a newspaper to do that really wasn't very possible, 5 or 10 years ago. If you think of a newspaper, and especially you think of the New York Times, it's like a class product, a mass class product. We tell you the 5 or 10 most important things that you need to know, as judged by our editors, every day. Whether it's international affairs, whether it's politics, national affairs, health, culture, sports, business. I mean, it's an amazing thing that you can pick this up and you can kind of get all this information. However, in a world where there are more and more people who are specialists and interested in going deeper on certain topics, the web enables us to do something else, and that is to reach down deeper and narrower to target some of those audiences and some of those readers who we think are, kind of have a particularly strong affinity with the New York Times. They're our readers, and if we get more of their mind time, if we get more of their reading time, that's going to do two things. One, it's going to bind them more to the New York Times at a time when they have this greater fragmentation of readership across the media world. And two, oh, by the way, it's going to make the New York Times more valuable to advertisers, because they're going to say, you know what, these people are kind of coming back, and these are the types of readers that we want to reach. So another thing that we did, and we did this about a year ago, was we expanded a financial news site within a site called DealBook. And DealBook is basically a site that kind of talks to the financial world, but the financial world writ large. It's not just people on Wall Street, but kind of the people on Wall Street and the people who in the financial world. It's really a global industry. It's an industry that touches everybody. If Europe is having problems, then companies that sell to Europe are having problems. So we added some reporters specifically to make sure that we were going deeper and narrower. The advantage of this is, first of all, finds those readers, but be able to add reporters. When I've added reporters, it's always been, I want reporters who, yes, they can go deep and narrow, but also they can pan back to 10,000, 20,000 feet, and they can write and inform and enhance our overall coverage. So done right, it's a win-win situation. And again, if you can maybe click on DealBook, you'll see, DealBook is like a blog within our site. It's very popular, and it's done very well. Again, we've more than hit our audience targets, and it's also generated new advertising that the New York Times did not have before. It's done so well that we're actually expanding another area of coverage on the web, another blog that is already highly successful, but also that we think that we can, kind of build even more. It's called Bits. It's our technology blog. So we're adding a few more reporters. Again, we're going to go, deeper and narrower, while also maintaining this broad audience and aiming at this broad audience that we traditionally have. So, kind of this altogether has really enabled us, I think, to kind of try to straddle these worlds where you have the newspaper, traditional newspaper audience, very broad, but also that you have an audience, the various niche audiences. And we can't go after every niche audience, but clearly there are some that are really, really important to us. The Caucus blog, which is about politics, kind of highly popular. At times, inside the newsroom, people have said, gee, why are we doubling down on things like, kind of technology and finance? We're kind of going deep. Why don't we just take those reporters and spread them out through the newsroom? And my response to that is, kind of, adding one person to a bunch of different departments is not going to move the needle. We got to look for ways to move the needle. And the second thing I say is, let's go to Washington 5 or 6 years ago to the publisher of the Washington Post and ask him if he would like to have the clock turned back when the guys who had the idea for Politico came in and said, hey, would you like to, we'd love to do this website, kind of a website within the Post and just kind of like all politics all the time. And he said, I don't think so. Big mistake, big mistake. They have now kind of, are competing with themselves. They lost an opportunity. And I said, I don't want us 5 years from now to be in a situation where we said, we had some opportunity to really build some new audiences that, kind of we've had, but we could build them more, whereas and let somebody else kind of go to them. And I think that you'll see more of this in the traditional media, because if you stay and you don't change, you're going to have problems. Now, does everything that we do work? No. We had this kind of wonderful, I'm not sure if I would say wonderful experiment. For a while online, you could actually get a edited view of the morning news huddle at the New York Times. Editors sitting around kind of the table, pitching their stories for page one and talking about the stories. I think that, kind of it was discontinued after, 3 to 6 months. I'm not sure if it was an audience thing and whether that many people really weren't watching it or whether it just doesn't translate that well. I think it probably doesn't translate that well. Anybody who's sat in meetings, they're interesting, but at the same time, I'm not sure, kind of looking from the outside, and probably all the most interesting bits were cut out anyway. But nonetheless, kind of, what I like about that is that it says that, kind of we've been trying things out of the box. We're not afraid to, embrace the different things that we can do on the web. I'm not big into social media myself, but anything that, kind of, we do have a lot of people who are into it, and there are a lot of devices, kind of on our site that people can engage. I expect we're going to be doing, more of that going forward. The paywall. I can't say anything more that has been said publicly, but it has been generally successful, and I think beyond our initial expectations, because you never know. I mean, a lot of people out in the outside world were saying, stupid idea, you're going to cut yourself off from the rest of the world. But I think that we have created a pay model. I don't want to really say it's a paywall. We've created a pay model that actually enables a lot of people to come in and get our news. But the people who want to read us the most are going to have to pay in some way, shape, or form. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. So first of all, you can get, I think, up to 20 look up the 20 articles a month. That's not a whole lot. You know, if you link through other things, you can actually go beyond that 20. If you're a subscriber to the paper, you can get every possible form, you know, kind of electronically free. That means, you know, your iPad, you know, kind of iPhone, whatever feed that you would like to have. If you just subscribe to the Sunday paper, you can also get, you know, so any kind of subscription will get you an online feed free or digital feed free along with that, which also has had the extent, I believe, of bringing more people and kind of getting our Sunday subscriptions to go up a bit. And this is at a time when everything else has been under pressure. My understanding is, I think the data that we've given out is that there are about 300,000 at the end of the second quarter, so that's the end of June 30th, which is only 3 months after we introduced the pay model, that there are about 300,000 paid online subscribers. You know, what's the limit? I don't know. Is that enough? No. Are we still under pressure like everybody else? Yes, a bit. But I don't think that, you know, kind of people are, you know, kind of looking to the future with a lot of fear. It's mostly excitement and how can we make this work in a better way. And I'll be happy to answer any questions when we're all done.